Hello everybody, it's Lazel here with another Magic the Gathering EDH deck tech. Today I'm talking about one of our new commanders, Ghalta, Stampede Tyrant. Ghalta is an 8 mana commander as 12/12 with Trample and has an ETB which says, when Ghalta, Stampede Tyrant enters the battlefield, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. This mono-green Stompy deck is going to be played as a one-turn kill deck, because we want to win in the turn when we bring Ghalta out onto the field. As soon as Ghalta hits the battlefield, we want to put as many powerful mono-green creatures onto the battlefield that can swing for the win immediately. For example, Worldspine Worm, an 11 mana 15/15 trample, which says when Worldspine Worm dies, put 3 5/5 green worm creature tokens with trample onto the battlefield, and when Worldspine Worm is put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. I believe already from this card you see where this deck is going. Pathraiser of Ulamog, an 11 mana 9/9 with Annihilator 3, and Pathraiser of Ulamog can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus, a 7 mana 4/6 with Reach, and at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. For 2 green Phyrexian mana and sacrificing 2 other creatures, we can put an indestructible counter on Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus. Zopandrel doesn't have that many powerful stats on itself, but its triggered ability is very useful to swing for the win immediately. Tyrannix Rex, a 7 mana 8/8, this spell can't be countered, Trample, Ward 4 and Haste and Toxic 4. Tyrannix Rex is a really powerful and strong creature which is hard to interact with due to the Ward 4, and you can also bring it out a few turns earlier before you bring out Ghalta to have a threat on the board, which can take care of a player by itself because of its Toxic 4. Kogla, the Titan Ape, a 6 mana 7/6, and when it enters the battlefield it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. When Kogla attacks, destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. And for 2 mana, return target human you control to its owner's hand. Kogla gains indestructible until end of turn. Kogla is also one of those creatures that you can bring out a few turns earlier, because on its attack trigger you can take care of nasty enchantments and artifacts that your opponents are playing that might interact with your game-winning turn. And Terastodon, an 8 mana 9/9, and when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents. For each permanent put into a graveyard this way, its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Terastodon is great because it targets non-creature permanents, so you can also take care of some nasty lands of your opponents, like Mazerfilth for example. What we are interested in is bringing out Ghalta as fast as possible, so we play mana spells like Llanowar Elves, a 1 mana 1/1 which we can tap to add 1 green mana, just as Fyndhorn Elves or Elvish Mystic. This deck is filled to the brim with ramp spells like Skyshroud Claim, a 4 mana sorcery, search a library for up to 2 forest cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Nature's Law, 2 mana sorcery, search a library for a forest card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And my personal favorite green ramp spell is Traverse the Outlands, a 5 mana sorcery, search a library for up to X basic land cards where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. We play a lot of very high-powered creatures, and even though we don't have Ghalta on the field, Traverse the Outlands can easily find us, for example, like 8 normal basic lands, which can set up a very powerful turn later on. Let's talk about some more very useful creatures that we can cheat out with Ghalta. For example, Verdant Sun's Avatar, a 7 mana 5/5, and when it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. As soon as people see that you're ramping out nicely, they know what's coming with Ghalta, so they will most likely swing at you, so Verdant Sun's Avatar is a nice way to restabilize your life total. Nyxbloom Ancient, a 7 mana 5/5 with Trample, and if you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. Once we've cast Ghalta, it might happen that we still have to wait for 1 turn, so producing a little bit more mana with a few of our remaining mana sources is great to cast some of our protection spells. Sword of the Harvest, a 6 mana 6/6 Trample, and whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. The great thing about Sword of the Harvest is, first of all, that it is a powerful creature on its own, and that its card draw is a May ability. Don't get me wrong, you will most likely always draw those cards, but depending on how many cards you have already drawn and how heavily you have ramped already, it might be wise to maybe not draw a card depending on what you're playing against. Defiler of Vigor, a 5 mana 6/6 Trample, and as an additional cost to cast green permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost 1 green green less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of green mana you pay. Whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Defiler of Vigor is an absolute staple in my opinion in every mono green Stompy deck, so this is definitely a must include in this deck. You get a discount for Ghalta later on and all of your other green permanent spells, and you also pump up your team, and those +1/+1 counters will be relevant too. Regal Force, a 7 mana 5/5, and when it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each green creature you control. Another great way to draw a lot of cards. Another great protection tool is Dawnglade Regent, a 7 mana 8/8, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. As long as you're the Monarch, permanents you control have hexproof. Let's say we didn't enable Haste immediately as soon as we brought out Ghalta and all of those creatures, but if Dawnglade Regent was one of those creatures, we at least get to draw another card at the end of our turn, and all of our creatures and all of our other permanents will have hexproof, which makes it even harder for our opponents to interact with our board, so we can swing for the win in the next turn. But let's talk about how we enable Haste. Zorak and Goreclaw, a 6 mana 6/5 trample, and other creatures you control have trample. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste until end of turn. Concordant Crossroads, a 1 mana world enchantment, which says all creatures have haste. Let's say we have put Defiler of Vigor onto the battlefield with Ghalta's ability. This enchantment will simply cost us 2 life to give all of our creatures haste. And of course, Finale of Devastation, a 2 mana and X sorcery, search a library and or graveyard for a creature card with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you search a library this way, shuffle it, and if X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X/+X and gain haste until end of turn. This is going to be a very useful sorcery, especially when we cheat out Nyxbloom Ancient with Ghalta. You want to win more, you get it. Momentous Fall, a 4 mana instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature. You draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then you gain life equal to its toughness. As soon as Ghalta hits the battlefield, its ETB goes onto the stack. You will simply hold priority, sacrifice Ghalta to Momentous Fall to draw 12 cards, and then you also gain 12 life, and afterwards you let Ghalta's ETB resolve. And I'm pretty sure that in those 12 cards which you have drawn, you will find a lot of creatures that you can put onto the battlefield, which will simply make up for Ghalta itself. In addition to that, Greater Good, a 4 mana enchantment which says sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. We are going to play the same line as with Momentous Fall. Ghalta hits the battlefield, the ETB goes onto the stack, we sacrifice Ghalta into Greater Good, we draw 12 cards, discard 3, and then we go for the cheating out with Ghalta's ETB ability. And one of my personal favorites, Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, a 3 mana 2/3. We can tap her to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast creature, spells or activated abilities of a creature or creature card. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, and untap it. Gwenna is also a card which in my personal opinion belongs into every mono green Stompy deck. If you bring out one of your mana dogs on turn 1, you can bring her out on turn 2, and then you can immediately ramp into more powerful creatures and you can also grow Gwenna. In my personal opinion, Gwenna closes a gap between your early game and your late game and makes a great bridge to really accelerate your game plan. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in Ghalta, Stampede Tyrant. Let me know down in the comments below which cards you would play in this deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.